once you've got all your materials, start to set everything up. Remember, you need your device, because on the device you will have the photographs that you are working from for your picture, and you need those images for looking at the colours, looking at some textures, looking at tones. Once you've set everything up, get the materials that you'll probably use first, and in this case I'm going to start with paint, and I'm trying to get a sort of light tone of paint colour for the biggest area in my drawing, which is the table surface. So remember, when you start with the biggest area first. You don't have to start with paint, but in this case I'm mixing up paint to pop on in the background. And then look how very carefully I'm holding the brush and painting up only one section in one colour. The lines that you drew will divide your picture up into sections. So I go up to the edges of the lines with my brush, and I can change the colours as I go along. And also you'll notice that I'm going in one direction with one layer, then I changed the colour and went over in another direction. Here I decided that I would like to try some thin marker pens. So we're using lots of different materials. You could start with the marker pens if you want, but in this section that's all been boxed off, lined off, I'm using two different tones of brown, and I am using lines in one direction and then turning my paper and going in another direction. So layering up the colours. You can see here I've changed markers. I went and moved over to thicker markers, and I'm bringing in a greenish colour and blending that together. The next section is boxed off, and I'm going to fill that with some green, carefully going up to the lines. Now I discovered that when I was using the markers, if you add some water to the marker pens, it makes it like paint. So if you don't have paint, that's something else you could do, is fill it with a marker pen, then take a brush or cotton pad, add some water, and it waters it down. I've had to look back at the picture to get the information for the tones for the kettle. And because the kettle is silver, I've decided to use just a pencil.
This bit's really dark.
The pencils I have are dark pencils, so I fill that in. And remember, when you're filling in shading, you've got to think about the directions that you shade in the tones. So the side of the kettle I went diagonally, and now I'm putting in this big dark area, and you notice I don't go over the line that's part of the lemon, I just go up to the edge, although it's very tempting to do the whole shape of the kettle, but there's a line that's stopping me. So just up to the where there is a line, and then I turned it on the side and added another layer of pencil. And then I went in even darker again for another shadow. At this stage here, I've decided that I want to start collaging. And to do collaging, I need some glue. Well, I didn't have any glue at home, so a great alternative is just an egg white. So here I'm just getting the egg white into one bowl, putting the egg yolk in another, and I'm using a cotton bud to put on the egg white to the area where I'm going to glue down a shape. The shape I decided to glue down was a circular shape, which is the circular dark part of the top of the kettle. So I've had to be very careful how I cut that out so it matches the shape. And now I'm thinking about this bit, which is the lemon. I looked back at my picture, so I could use the paint. I might look for some scrap paper that is yellow in colour. And it just so happens I had an old brochure here, so that was quite a good match. Or I could even go back and use some felt pens. So it's completely up to you. Have a think, lay them all out and think what would be best. And because it's a small area, because there's a line stopping it, I've decided to use the marker because I can be more precise. So again, I'm going one way. I'm popping in the colour only up to where the line is. I'm not going past that line. That is the background. And then I thought, yeah, I would like to use some paint as well. So with this paint, I've had to go round and round and round to get it nice and thick. Otherwise, it's too watery. So remember, we do that in class. We get the paint really thick by going round and round with some water in the little palette. I've had to change over to a thin brush for this part because it is small. So if I use that big brush, it would have went outside the lines. But using the thin brush gives me more control. And it just so happened when I was looking through the magazine that there was actually a lemon. So I'm going to cut this out. I'm not sure if I'm going to use it, but I really liked the fact that I had lemons in my still life, and coincidentally there was a lemon in the magazine. So I was kind of considering maybe just gluing that on over the line, but then I decided against it. I do like the drawing of the line. So I've moved over to using the green pens. Again, I could have used paint, I could have used a crayon, I could have used a coloured pencil, I could have collaged it, but I've decided to blend with the pens. One colour on top of the other, and never just use a colour straight from the box. I'm always putting on another tone on top so it doesn't look flat. Putting some detail for the edge of the line very carefully. There was a shadow under the line, so I could have put a green shadow, but I decided to use the pencil. So the video continues on to show you all these sorts of different ways of using different materials. I want you to watch and see what other materials I use and how I use them. Also remember that every part of your drawing is a section. You've drawn one image on top of the other, so you've created these small sections of shapes. So every time you add a colour, whether it's with paint or pen, you only paint up to one line, one section at a time. So this one section here, thin blue pen, only up to that line. Even if the line is faded, it's still a line. Remember, that line's been covered with the white paint that we started right at the beginning of the project, but you're still sectioning it off. So each section is its own part, its own colour, its own texture, its own different material that you've decided to use. So it's all disconnected. Remember, we're studying Cubism, and we spoke about how the image was disconnected or disassembled to make up your picture. That's why we have these separate lines intersecting each other, so you end up breaking it into smaller sections. The way the pen's been used here is completely different from the way the blue pen's been used, so you can see that it's more scratchy lines, a little bit less precise, so the shadow can stand out only up to the edge of that line with the lemon and that edge of the kettle. So here I'm looking for collage materials. I found this dark part of the kettle. It's kind of black. I'm using a sort of grey patterned piece of paper. Cut out the shape. It's not exact, but it's pretty close to represent the handle of the kettle. So I just trim that off, measure it up again. Now I left the cotton bud sitting in the egg white, so it's soaked it up nicely. So now I can just apply the egg white to the area where I want to paint. Place it carefully, it's going to be fiddly. Just take your time. If you've got any areas where you're deciding to add paper or wrapping paper or tissue paper or newspaper. And then if there is a bit that is kind of left out, you can fill it in with a colour. For this one, I'm just going to use my pencil because it's quite dark. So here I'm going to collage again, and I'm just using an old envelope. It's a nice sort of matte brown colour. So I need to try and figure out how it's going to cover that one section. So I'm laying it down, and I'm actually cutting it close to where I'm going to place the shape. So I can keep measuring it, taking it off, looking, and this is a good little tip to fold back where you want it to fit, so you have a crease where you're going to cut, and then it should fit quite neatly in any space that you're going to use. So that's as much as I'm going to do today on the drawing. I've still quite a bit to go. You can see I've still got the leaves to do, the plate, the rest of the cooker, still a lot, but one section, quite a big section, is already done. You can see the different pens, paints, collaged with the envelope, used different marks, different lines. So I've made a good start. I'm going to stop now until my next lesson.